Palms are flat, fingers spread close to the knees, fingers forward, and just start to move your shoulders forward of the fingers and back again. Hips back towards the heels. You can change the position of the fingers, rocking side to side, different angles, different movements, circling the shoulders. And eventually you'll get to a point where maybe you can turn the wrist forward, fingers back, leaning back there. Maybe the hands can come beside the legs, inside the legs, if it feels too intense. 5 to 10 repetitions, and then just holding for 10 seconds there. Breathing. Softening through the shoulders, the face and jaw. Fingers forward, and then we'll flip it the other way. Back of the palms on the floor, either both at the same time or one at a time. Wriggle the fingers. Maybe you can straighten the elbows more. A lot of the time you might need to support with the other hand doing these elbow circles or elbow rotations. Both sides. And then at some point, after wriggling fingers to each, or thumb to each finger, leaning back, elbows rotated, I'm leaning back, getting a deep stretch through the extensor side. And then release that. Same for the other side. Elbow rotates, trying to keep the back of the hand as close as I can to the floor. Wriggling fingers if you can. Thumb to each finger. And then slightly leaning back, just to get that deep stretch through the extensor side of the arm. And then we're done. So you're on all fours, quadruped. It's the shoulder blades coming together, moving apart. And it's this up and down motion, makes the shoulder blades come together, push them away, push the hands away. A variation with your hands out forward, squeeze the shoulder blades back, push the hands forward. Squeeze them back, push them forward. You'll be feeling this in the shoulder blades. Those little bones in the back of the body, they're floating with muscle all around them, attaching to them, rotator cuff muscles. If you have your hands anchored into the floor, you'll be able to go deeper. As those shoulder blades come together, you let the weight of the body push down and those shoulder blades will squeeze more. And then you push actively into the floor and those shoulder blades will round off the rib cage. Do around 10. Up and down, and then you push into the floor, get that separation, and then you can squeeze them together, another 10 seconds, and we're done. Similar to the protraction, retraction of the shoulder blade, this time those shoulders are up and back or up and forward. From a seated position, we're doing this. Up and forward, up and back. Or down and back. Whichever makes sense to your brain. This is a good way to practice it first, or even with the hands down, we're basically doing this. With the hands on the floor, it closes the chain. We're able to anchor those shoulder blades more intensely, and you'll be able to get in deeper. Keep going. You can pause at different points that feel right for you. Those shoulders should be starting to warm up. Here we're exploring the axis or the motion that your spine can do in all the different directions. Extension, side or lateral bending, flexion as it pushes up, lateral flexion again out to the side and down. If you think of a ruler, plastic ruler can bend obviously forward and back, but your spine can also go side to side, forward and backwards. So taking it on this level with your spine pointing towards the floor, you're pushing it down and you're taking it out to the side, pushing it up, out to the side and down again. So if you think of it, we're moving around the little plumb line or the axis going up and down. So that spine, extension or pushing down. Take it out to the side, push it up to the ceiling, take it back to the other side, drop it down. And as you move, you can go both directions, rolling in both ways. My hips, my butt basically moves in just a natural way without force. When you take your spine up, you can think about squeezing your hips in, and as you tuck your tail in, that'll help push the spine up. Same as when you're going down. So it's like when we do a dip dome, spine pushes down, the butt sticks out. But out to the side, if your hips go left, your left shoulder pushes down to that hip. If your hips go right, right shoulder pushes down to that hip. If you were sitting up, doing it from this position, chest pushes forward, then you push the side of your body out one way, the back pushes back, you're curving forward, and the other spine, or basically the side, lateral body pushes out. It becomes or looks like a body roll. Think of it leading with the chest, pushing it forward, and then pushing it back, pigeoning it back. And at the same time, the skeleton is rolling around that axis. It will take you a while to mobilize and get this spine moving. If you've never done this before, you may just want to start with the dips and domes up and down. And then even from this central position, try to push the hips out one direction. Spinal circles, you can start by hands on both knees, just circling, getting that lower back gently pushing down into the floor. And then doing one leg where you're holding one knee in and the other knee is going to drop out, go forward, and then come back into your chest. Taking it on a range of motion, you're going to work the groin muscle. Just pay attention, make sure the hip feels safe. If you even need to bring the hand in there at any point. And then we go the other direction, so reverse that circling. Having my other knee in just keeps the lower back flat. So like 3 to 5. And then we'll do the other side. Hold that knee in. So the other leg goes forward, out to the side, comes back in, whichever way you start that circling. 3 to 5 that side, that direction. And then taking it out the other way, reversing that direction. There's always one side that's more coordinated and always one way of circling that feels more coordinated for the brain. So doing it all, obviously over time, get the body more in tune, more coordinated, just have that greater awareness. To finish, even pulling the knees into the chest, you'll feel that lower back lift up and then lower. So we're going to bring one foot forward and aiming to have 90 degree position. You're basically flat through here. From your knee up, we're not going deep into the lunge to begin, we're staying back. What we're aiming to do here is to squeeze your glutes and tuck under. And immediately you'll feel through here, through the front of that pelvis, hip flexors basically going to try to stretch because you're squeezing the backside. Front side has to lengthen. Contraction, lengthen or stretch. And you're pulsing as you keep squeezing your butt. And not moving far forward, but I'm feeling that through this front of the hip. Keep squeezing the butt. You can also do an extra bit of trying to drag the knee forward as you come forward without it moving. And that just adds another element. I'm coming forward, I'm holding, squeezing the glutes, knees trying to pull forward. It's all working through here. And then just holding for 10 seconds. And breathing. Then even soften the glutes and you'll notice you usually be able to lunge even deeper into there. From the front view, as I was doing that, my foot was in line with my knee. But if you change the position of that back foot, say out to the side, outwards, and squeezing, leaning forward, I'm feeling it work in different parts of that hip flexor coming through. So my toes now are turned in, squeezing the butt, leaning forward. And I can feel that in just slightly different areas to if the toe and the foot was in line with that knee. Again, everyone's going to be different. Everyone's joints will internally rotate, externally rotate, different to the next person. So you've got to find it and feel, experiment for yourself. Remember, we're having that 90 degrees. I've got my toes tucked. That just adds another dimension to the quad stretch. This time I've got props here if you need them. If you need to have those extensions of the arms. Some of you will be able to balance. Some might even need a chair. We're squeezing the glutes, tucking the tail under, and this leg, I'm feeling it really work quite tight already. Moving in and out of that as I continue to squeeze, moving forward and back. Doesn't have to be too far. And then just holding forward. Before we did the knee pulling forward as well, you can try to pull the knee forward as you come into it. Soften, go back. Squeeze, tuck under. Try to pull the knee forward. You'll feel that through here. You can experiment, explore different positions, maybe hanging a little bit deeper. Pull the knee, soften it. And I always like to end it where I just release the glutes and let the joints just go further into that shape. Here we want to have the shoulders over the hands and the knees under the hips. What can happen, some people have their knees quite close and that means you'll be quite scrunched up. Take the knees back. So the hands under the shoulders, knees are directly below the hips. You tuck your toes, you push actively down into the floor, so the shoulders even push down, then lift the knees, lift your butt up. My heels are quite high off the floor. I sometimes like to just pedal through my heels to get a bit more stretch through the calf muscles, through the hamstrings. Every day will be different. Even notice the shoulders. So if you come down for a moment, sometimes your hands need to be wider apart, a little bit wider than the shoulders, or fingers turned out rather than the fingers facing forward. That can change how the shoulder joints take the body weight. So again, hands under the shoulders, maybe those knees need to step back a little bit to be more under the hips, toes tucked. Lift your butt up, head drops, maybe between the arms. Pushing the head and chest back towards the knees. Again, my heels are quite off the floor. It doesn't matter. Maybe I can walk up and down through the heels, bending one knee. Maybe I can try to get those heels to settle, pushing into the floor more. As I push into the floor, my shoulders shrug around my ears, building strength in the arms, stretching the back line of the body from calves up through to hamstrings. Coming down. The squat assessment is there for us just to pay attention to how deep we can actually go, how much the knees can bend, how much the ankles can compress. Some of you, when you go for a squat, you'll be up high, arms forward. You might be leaning quite deeply. Others may be able to get down, but the heels come off the floor, yet the hips come down quite deep. The thighs, the back of the thighs are touching, calf muscles, hamstrings. Some of you will be able to get the heels down and be in that deep squat. All are fine and perfect. Wherever your squat is today, come down into it. If you are able to, in the shape, I'm just gently shifting my body weight forward, knees over toes, then out to the other side. Just exploring a bit of here. I'm getting a bit of ankle compression. Obviously the thighs are working, hips as well, opening up there, just pushing out to the sides. Everyone will feel different in these shapes. Skeletal variation, always make sure of that. Our joints, our bones all grow at different lengths, different abilities in range of motion, even where the leg inserts into the ball and socket joint, the hip socket can be different. Some people the ball and socket joint faces forward, others that whole opening faces back or maybe to the side. So that will affect the way that our skeleton can bend and fold. If you can only bend to here because of the way the knees are shaped, the way the back of the knees don't fold into each other, that's totally fine too. Maybe rest the arms, elbows onto the thighs. If your heels do come off the floor, start with the heels on an object so that when you come down, you're able to balance there in space. The heels are actually supported by something under them, whether you use a block, something a little bit higher if you need. This is an assessment as well as a stretch too. It's a stretch, it's a mobility exercise. in this shape, we're going to start to be putting pressure in through just the front of the ankle. Obviously the hips, they're opening up a little bit. The knees are going to be wider here, hip flexors. There's decompression happening in the spine. Squats I find very comfortable, other people won't. But just seeing how the body folds is a good starting point for everybody. And when you're ready to come out, it's either gently leaning back, make sure the knee joints feel safe, rolling back with the feet forward, or hands coming forward, gently rolling your body up. Okay, floating tabletop. It's also used for the Frogger assessment to see how well you can do the Frogger, how much strength you have there. Similar to the A-frame setup, our hands under the shoulders, slightly wider, fingers are splayed, knees under the hips, toes are tucked under. So as it suggests, floating tabletop, we're going to push the hands actively down. See how I round this upper area? I'm rounding the thoracic, but my head doesn't lift up, doesn't lower, it's more neutral. I'm squeezing my butt to tuck the tail under, and as I tuck that tail under, that will also contract the abdominals underneath, that core element there, and I'll slightly lift the knees. I keep squeezing my butt, keep pushing into the floor, keep rounding the shoulders. Maybe then taking the shoulders slightly forward of the fingers. You can see that slight movement, my knees lift a bit higher. If I lose that push, keep pushing down, squeeze your butt, come out when you need to catch a breath, shake the hands. We're trying to slowly build up strength in this position. So after taking a short break, you can come back and try it again. Hands push down the thoracic, this part of my spine pushes up. I curve and round the upper shoulders, squeeze my butt, tuck the tail under, lift the knees. I'm holding here, I'm bracing. Maybe the shoulders move forward. Keep breathing, keep pushing, keep that curve, keep squeezing the butt, then lowering down. Shake it out. Floating tabletop. So working with the crab setup, as well as the crab assessment, this is testing our muscles and how much we can push into the floor and support our body weight as we push down and eventually lift the hips up. We eventually are aiming to get to this position. In the beginning, you want your feet well away from you, about hip width apart, and your hands, fingers pointing out, are going to come close to the hips. Then we're going to roll the shoulders up and back and down to lift and elevate the rib cage. From here, you're going to gently try to push into the floor, shoulders back and down, chest lifts, and see if the hips can come off the ground. You saw that my hips come up and forward. That's totally fine to begin. I'm pushing into the floor, breathing and holding. You may not have that much strength at this point, so if you need to come down, lower. You can bring the hips back in so the hands are in line with the hips. Start again when you're ready. Roll the shoulders back and down, chest lifts, push down into the floor, keeping the elbows straight. So not trying to bend the elbows, having them locked in a safe way. My hips have come forward. And the reason I wanted you to have your feet far forward is eventually you may be able to swing your hips up and through. Keep pushing down. This is the beginning of the crab. When you need to come down, lower back down. Release the hands. Give them a shake. So working on flexion and extension of the spine, moving from this child's pose into this cobra pose. We start in this flexion. Hands can come forward. Hips back towards the heels as best they can. Maybe the head can come down, chin tucks in. As you breathe in, I push into the floor and I slowly lift my hips away and let the hips slowly drop forward. If this is where you're comfortable at the moment, keep pushing down into the floor with the hands, or maybe let the hips drop and the spine extends. As you breathe in, pull the hips back and then exhale to sit back. You'll find a good rhythm with the breathing as you go. Spend a few seconds in each position. I inhale forward, then exhale to let the hips drop. Maybe hold and breathe in and out a few cycles. And I use my in-breath. I squeeze my glutes to pull away. Exhale back, hips to heels. Head can come down, arms can come down to the floor. We'll do one more. So as you breathe in, I lift up, hips away from heels. Squeezing my glutes as they come down, pushing through the floor actively with the hands, getting that back bend. Then I inhale to lift up out of there, then exhale to drop the hips back. Flexion, extension of the spine, moving from this child's pose into cobra. So we're going to bring one knee forward, so the right leg, turn it out to the side, and then sitting back on that right hip. And from here, we're trying to get a 90-degree angle with the front leg, as well as a 90-degree bend in the back. Some of you, as you try to straighten up, will get compression here. Maybe the knee comes forward, maybe the knee goes back, or if you're able to, with blocks or cushions or even a rug, put it under that right hip so that you're a little higher off the floor. These knees are able to do 90 degrees a lot easier, and as I come forward, there's less crampiness into this hip. What we're aiming to do, hands either side of the front leg or the knee, you're pushing forward or letting the body come forward with a flat back, try not to curve, and then using that leg to push into the floor to come up. Dropping forward, pushing down to lift up. You're going to feel it in this right hip. The outer part of the hip, you may feel a little bit in the groin or the adductor, hamstring. Doing about 10. And then even as you come forward, push the knee into the floor, hold that for 10 seconds and then let it soften, and you might be able to get the body further forward. Other side. Left leg. Each side's going to be a little bit different. Left knee comes down in front of me. Right leg's trying to go back. I'm elevated this time. One side will always be a little bit easier for you. Whether you're on the floor or elevated, chest is coming over that front knee, letting the body come forward, using that leg pushing into the ground to help you get the lift up. Obviously, you're using your hands as well. Getting up and down around 10 times. And then just staying forward, push actively into the floor, holding, breathing. And then just soften that. And then when you're ready, you're pushing back up. The seated clasp hand forward fold. Chest lifts, grabbing the fingers behind your back, trying to interlace them. And then from there, chest keeps lifting, squeezing the shoulder blades, and eventually you may be able to straighten the arms. For some of you, that might be enough. You'll feel it through the arms, through the shoulders. Others, if you feel comfortable, try lifting the hands up, and using that to help tilt you forward. You may not be able to come far, and you'll probably find the hands are trying to slip apart. So you may need to reclasp those fingers. Chest lift, squeeze the shoulders, folding forward, lifting the hands up, coming back. It is not about how far you come forward, it's about trying to get those hands up in the air. If this feels really awkward and uncomfortable, I prefer to do it standing, where I have my knees bent, do the same thing, hands clasping, chest lift, squeeze the shoulders back. And then with the knees bent, I lean and push the chest forward, but keep the arms coming up. Let the head just dangle and keep the arms coming up and forward. Breathe in to lift back up. Maybe you need to readjust. Standing, make sure the balance is safe. Make sure you're able to rest here. If you need to release the hands in this shape. Some of you will be comfortable in the chair. Some may be more comfortable standing. Make sure the balance is as best you can when you're standing upright. Make sure the arms, the hands, the shoulders, everything feels safe in that position as you come forward and then lifting back up. 3-point bridge. It's a similar setup to when we do the prep for the crab. You can bring both hands back behind you, just in line with the hips, but then the arm you're starting with is going to turn behind you, the fingers, and then resting there. The shoulders over the hand. Your feet are wide apart. Push down with that supporting arm and try to take the hips off the floor. That might be where you are right now. So you can practice that. Push down, shoulders over the wrist, lift the hips. Maybe you need to come back down. And those fingers and the hand might need to be subtly changed in that direction as you lift up. Try both hands. The eventual point where we want to be, you use the free hand in front of your face. So as you push down, hips start to lift, similar to the crab, but then that hand goes up behind you. Shoulders still over the wrist. Hips are high, and I'm looking at that thumb. 3-point bridge. Coming back down, keeping that shoulder over the wrist. Again, as you practice this, you may be able to get to a point where you can lift the hips slightly, a little higher. Maybe the hand goes up into the air. From the other side, your dominant arm may be a stronger arm. So therefore, fingers are pointing away, locking out that elbow, shoulders over the wrist so you can push down to lift the hips. You're just testing how the body, how the joints and the shoulders feel in that position. If you feel comfortable and safe, push down, lift the hips higher. Maybe you can take the hand straight over immediately. Coming back down. For some, you'll be in that halfway position, arm in the air, or hovering anywhere in between. This one will take time, strength in one arm rather than two for the crab. The crab, we push both hands down and have the hips up. Take your time, don't rush. Work through each little progression and enjoy.